ich wundere eigentlich nicht, der Vogel verzählen.
Live from the hippest spot online, you've arrived at the Pop Culture Juke Joint, the only weekly podcast you'll need for intelligent showbiz chats. Located just up the street from the Peach Pit and down that dark, damp alley behind Fonzie's garage, you'll find former newsman and current hard-boiled crime writer Anthony Venutolo, chatting with guests about everything from old school classics to new school staples. So head up to the bar, grab a drink, and settle in here at the Pop Culture Juke Joint. Now, your host, Anthony Venutolo.
Welcome to another episode of the Pop Culture Juke Joint. Tonight, I'm joined once again by Jack Lugo, pop culture extraordinaire and James Bond expert. We're going to take a deep dive and have a little bit of a conversation about the Oscar-nominated film Manchester by the Sea. First, let me tell you a little bit about the movie. A hardened handyman named Lee returns to his hometown in New England after the death of his brother to take care of his 16-year-old nephew. But his arrival also unearths his checkered past. Soon, Lee comes back into contact with his estranged wife as he deals with life in his tight-knit former community. The film was written and directed by Kenneth Lonergan, garnered a slew of Academy Award nominations a few weeks ago, and stars Casey Affleck, Kyle Chandler, Michelle Williams, and Lucas Hedges. So sit back, relax, grab a drink, enter the juke joint. So Jack, we're going to talk a little bit about Manchester by the Sea.
Okay.
I saw it last weekend, and yeah, I mean, before we go on, I guess, should we announce whether this is going to be a spoiler-free or spoiler full kind of conversation? What do you think?
I think we have to discuss spoilers.
Yeah,
I mean,
okay.
it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
And if you haven't seen it, please go see it and then check back with us.
Yes, exactly.
But yeah, we want to definitely talk about some of the plot points, and it's hard to do without discussing what happens.
Perfect. Okay, so I saw it last weekend, and I saw it by myself. My wife would never sit through a movie like this. And, immediately, I love movies that feel like a Springsteen song. Blue collar guys, dark, deep, mysterious past, some tragic event, and steeped in, high drama. And that's what this was. I mean, this really was this was a little bit of a downer, this film, which stars the always great Casey Affleck, right?
Yeah, he's phenomenal in this. And actually, I think it was Matt Damon was supposed to star in it, and then he was actually supposed to star and direct it. But it went to Casey Affleck, and I think that was a wise decision.
Yeah, I do too. Well, it was Matt Damon and Jonathan Krasinski who brought the project to Kenneth Lonergan with the idea for Kenneth to write the script. And Matt Damon was going to star in it and direct it. And I'm assuming that Krasinski was going to play the older brother, and that part went to Kyle Chandler. So it would have been like an interesting film. I mean, as much as I do like Matt Damon, and he's got Boston in his blood and everything like that, he could probably do that whole accent. Well, he has the accent. I mean, that's where he's from. And let's not forget. I mean, he himself he won an Oscar. I mean, the guy knows films. But yeah, I mean, I think the performance that Casey Affleck gave us, as with many Casey Affleck performances, is very understated. There is a power in his performance because it's a quiet performance. So I'm kind of wondering, how can this quiet performance be such a tour de force? And I think you'll know once you start watching it. Before I let you get to what you have to say, for me, I've seen this scene a few times, but when he gets the call that his brother, I guess, went into cardiac arrest, and he was in the hospital. He drops everything. He's a janitor. He rushes up to the hospital. It's about an hour and a half away or whatever. Watch him, next time you watch the scene, watch him walk through those doors into the hospital. He's got this look on his face. It's a panicked look. It's a rushed look. It's an unknowing look of what is going to happen when I walk through these doors. We've all been there when we're going to the hospital, and he had that, and that's what sealed the deal for me in watching his performance.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, anyone who's ever, had to go to a hospital for a loved one or lost a loved one, I think he can relate to it. It's so easy to overact a scene like that. And like you said, it's understated. It's not, he accomplished the exact right tone for that scene. And obviously for throughout the whole movie, there's a lot going on, and you could just sort of read it in his face pretty much.
Yeah, my only concern about, while I was watching this was, he's an unlikable character, but he has a tragic past, okay, and I'm sure we'll get to that in a second. But
yeah,
he's unlikable. People want to like him. Women flirt with him at a bar.
Yeah. Oh, the first scene where the woman's coming on to him. It's a couple of women actually come on to him when he's doing his janitor work. The one scene where she's talking on the phone, and then the other woman with the shower. You could tell, obviously she's confrontational. She's going about it completely, in a weird way. But but you could tell that there's some sexual tension there, and he's just not playing along with it. Obviously, and then we learn more about his past and obviously why he, pushes himself out of the situations where he might have to get intimate with someone.
Or, is he just simply punishing himself from having any kind of joy in his life whatsoever? And I don't know.
That's part of it too. Yeah. I mean, that whole scene where the brother, takes him furniture shopping. He had to practically drag him to go furniture shopping. He was just going to live in that basement apartment unfurnished.
I mean, if I ever wanted to harm myself, I would get a basement apartment like that. And that's where I would probably go. It was the saddest apartment I've ever seen on celluloid in a long time. But that's the kind of guy he was. He didn't want to feel joy because he had so much pain in his heart from an event that we will get to. So his brother passes away, played by the great Kyle Chandler. I love Kyle Chandler in everything he does. The guy, another guy, he really is an unsung hero. Kyle Chandler is an unsung hero. He hopefully one day, I'm sure he won his Emmy and of course for Friday Night Lights, but this guy needs to be on the big screen full time. This guy is just a tour de force. So his brother passes away. Okay, we're not really giving anything away there because it's in the synopsis of the film, for God's sakes.
Yeah.
But the main conflict of the film comes when he's read his brother's will by the lawyer, and he basically is told that he has to take care of his nephew now full time. The kid is 15, 16 years old?
Yeah, he's 16 in the story. And he's played by Lucas Hedges, who's also nominated for Best Supporting Actor. And that's also a great performance, too.
A great performance. My God. A lot of people probably would have expected maybe Kyle Chandler, but this kid was amazing. It's really hard to play let me rephrase that. It's really hard for a teenager to come across in a project as likable. I mean, every kid I've seen on TV lately, on TV series, Fear the Walking Dead is a great example. Where I just want to take these teenagers and throw them off of a bridge. But this kid, I mean, he evoked what being a teenager was really like. From the pathos and the uncertainty of the future, juggling girlfriends, being on the hockey team. I mean, he was an everyday American teenager, and he was a likable kid. He was a sweet kid. I mean, considering what had just happened to him in his life, he was living with his father. His mother was troubled, played by the great, you know who I'm talking about,
Gretchen Mol from Boardwalk Empire.
From Boardwalk Empire, and when I first saw her, I was like, is that Gretchen Mol? I mean, that kind of looked like her, it sounded like her, but she was playing. She sounded to me like she had a Boston accent and that would be probable because it all took place in New England. But then we see her later in the film, and she kind of cleaned up a little bit, and she didn't seem so rough around the edges, so to speak, right?
Yeah, I mean, we're used to, because, anyone who doesn't know, you used to do the recaps for Boardwalk Empire. So Gretchen Mol played this character, Jillian Darmody, who was also a mother who had issues, to say the least.
Of course.
So we won't get into that because obviously that's a whole other topic.
Yes.
But yeah, she's only in 2 scenes in this film. But there is a contrast, obviously, when we first see her, it's in a flashback, which I think the way they do flashback in this film is it's very organic. You don't really, feel like, it's forcing you to go back in time to when Kyle Chandler's character was still alive. But you do see her when he gets the prognosis. And then she kind of storms off, and you don't see her again until later in the film. And then she's married to Matthew Broderick, and they're this Christian rehab. She's obviously gone through rehab, and she's has this entire new outlook, or at least she tries to. Obviously, seeing her son again, definitely, and you can tell in her performance that even though she's trying to play it cool, she definitely is going through a lot just seeing her son there, and then obviously things happen. But yeah, she does give a decent performance. But I was disappointed she was only in 2 scenes. I wish, because we know she's capable of much more.
Yeah, well, I mean, look at Michelle Williams. I mean, she was only in 3 or 4 scenes herself.
Yeah, she got a nomination too.
Yeah, and let me tell you, those were 4 3.5 powerful scenes.
Yeah, I mean, those scenes were highly charged.
Exactly.
The ones that she's in.
And you bring up a good point about the flashbacks, because I feel like Lonergan used flashbacks the way we go through life. I mean, we see something and automatically images flow into our brain, and we think about, remember the time we were doing this, and that's how I felt. Casey Affleck was kind of going through this entire situation of being back in a town he did not want to be in. And, he was just thinking about, I'm back in this town. I don't want to be here. I finally got myself out of here, and now I have to take care of my nephew. And he's in a little bit of a pickle because of it.
Yeah, I think maybe we should talk about the traumatic event.
Let's do that. Why don't you start it out, and I can help you if you miss something.
Okay, so they kind of tease this because they, obviously you don't know right away about this. The flashbacks kind of, go back and forth. But we eventually learned that, he had a wife and 3 children. One was an infant. and basically it's incredibly tragic. What happens is this story, obviously alcoholism plays a huge part in this story, but it doesn't beat you over the head. Like, it's not constantly telling you, oh, this is about alcoholism and the traumas that can occur as a result. But basically he's wasted. He had a party with his friends, and he stayed up all night, and he decided he made a fire in the fireplace, and then he decided to go off to the store to get some beer because he was out of beer, and he walked to the store, so it took 20 minutes each way, and then when he comes back, the house is on fire, and his wife is was rescued, but the three children all perished. So that's some really heavy shit to deal with.
Yeah, when I was watching that scene, I was like, holy shit, what happened? And I think his wife, I don't think it was as much as she was saved. I think she slept downstairs. The kid slept upstairs, and by that point it was too little, too late. And it was a hard scene to watch because you saw the firemen just kind of picking through the ashes and the wood in the house, just finding these little bodies, and that was rough. I mean, it was a rough scene.
It's a very rough scene, and then you kind of realize, wow, this man is like you said, he's punishing himself. He's living with a tremendous amount of guilt, and and Michelle Williams plays his ex-wife who was saved, who survived the fire, and going back to that town and seeing Michelle Williams has moved on. She's remarried, and around the time that he calls everyone for the funeral, he learns that she's pregnant. And so it's a very heavy thing for this character to deal with.
Yeah, I mean, they were bound together through their pain. And when he finds out that not only is, she's remarried, but now she is pregnant, and, they may, I know probably what was going through his head, that they weren't going to have that, as odd as it sounds, that bond anymore. She has gone and moved on with her life and tried to find some sort of a semblance of happiness, even though, we come to realize that she really is just as pained as he is. And the one scene on the street where, she wants to have lunch with him, and he can't even bring himself to have lunch with her. And
it's too much for him to deal with. And then this plays back to Lucas Hedges' character, Patrick, who he's now the guardian of. And Patrick is like, well, he wants to he's 16 years old. He wants to pretty much live in his dad's house where he's always lived. He's kind of alienated from his mom because of the past as well. And so the expectation is that we won't, what the audience is sort of inclined to root for is we want Casey Affleck to kind of learn to deal with the pain and sort of adjust to his life as this guardian and take on this new role and stay in the town because he basically Patrick makes it clear that he has no interest in moving away from Manchester. He has a life there. He has his school, his friends, his girlfriends, and he doesn't want to leave that town. And I think the expectation is that they'll somehow work it out, and obviously it's way too much. And
yeah, I mean the kid has a great line when when Lee says, I got to go back to Boston. I got a job in Boston. And Patrick's like, well, you're a janitor. Can't you just do that anywhere? I mean, like, why do you need to go back to Boston to do that? And like you said, there is some sort of a hope that Lee will, pick himself up by his bootstraps and just kind of, find a way to make it work. And, the film is a downer, Jack. Let me just say.
Oh yeah, definitely.
Did you cry?
No, I didn't cry, but it was, it was a very, heavy film to have to watch.
Yeah, yeah.
I think had Patrick's character been younger, I think it would have been a lot more difficult because obviously, what we're dealing with also is this, when the loved one passes and you want to abide by their wishes, and that's what Casey Affleck's character is going through is, he wants to kind of fulfill the wishes of his brother who clearly wanted him to raise his son in the event of his death, and he just can't do it. I mean, for not just the past, but also his current problem. He's an alcoholic. He's getting into fights. And then just being in that town is provoking this a lot of terrible behavior and. Just and it's obviously just making him miserable just having to stay there. So the idea that he can just somehow move on with his life and it just wasn't possible. But if Patrick, I think if Patrick was younger and let's say it would have been easier to adjust to a move, then I would like to think that maybe. Living in Boston, living in another area would have somehow made that fulfillment of the brother's wishes possible. But with the kid's 16, he has a couple more years. I mean, he did say he doesn't want to go to college, but who knows? They don't really have a sense of, obviously, kids say things like that all the time. So, you have a couple more years until he's kind of a full-fledged adult. So, the solution that they come up with at the end of the movie, even though it's sad, you kind of feel like it's for the best. Yeah,
But could you even just imagine if Lee took care of this kid when he was in the third grade? I mean, the thought of Lee taking this kid to school with a lunchbox and dropping him off and having to be there to pick him up at like 3 or 5 or 6 o'clock if he's in aftercare and doing homework with you know what, man? I don't see it. It would have been a different film.
Yeah, it would have totally been a different. I mean, I like that they did it this way because I think Lucas Hedges was great in the role, and I think it had a very important story to tell with the characters as they were. So I mean, but that's just my own head working when I saw the film. It's like, oh, maybe if he was younger, they would have worked something out. But obviously that just wasn't meant to be. And I think the reason why, even though it is depressing, I kind of came away from the film that I just think that it was kind of for the best. Basically, obviously we're revealing major spoilers. So, the resolution is that he'll stay with these family friends, and he can also, take care of the boat. The house would obviously have to be put up for rent until he's old enough to take over the house. But, basically he can stay in Manchester. Lee can go back to Boston, and you kind of get the consolation of, Lee's looking for a better apartment and possibly, with an extra room so that, Patrick can visit him. So, Lee is not totally leaving Patrick's life. He just can't stay in Manchester.
Right. And, we come to understand why, and it's understandable to us by that point.
Yeah.
Let's talk briefly about Oscars. Casey Affleck won the Golden Globe, and Denzel won the SAG. So that concerns me because we all know, I mean, let's face it, we like to think of the Golden Globes as a precursor to the Oscars, but let's face it, the SAG is what really predicts the Oscars. And
we had that experience last year with Sylvester Stallone.
Oh, did we ever?
Yeah.
Did we ever?
That was for Best Supporting.
Yeah, most certainly was. I have a fear that as good as this movie is and as great as Casey Affleck's performance is, I think it might be a little, the film just might be too much of a downer for the voting audience. I don't know. What's better than not a feel good, but like a bravura performance by Denzel in a beloved play? Which he also directed the film of. I don't know. I think it's going to be a race. And
it is. I haven't seen Fences, so I and I'm not familiar with the play, but I probably will see it at some point. I think I could understand why maybe, and also Casey Affleck's younger. Obviously there'll be other opportunities for him, going forward.
Sure.
So it's hard to judge, obviously, because I haven't seen Denzel's performance. But yeah, it could definitely go either way.
So let me ask you before we move on to our next subject, if you could only have one Affleck in your life, would it be the brooding Casey Affleck, the guy who's always dependable, the Kevin McReynolds of actors, or would you get the matinee idol, the box office movie star, Batman himself, Ben Affleck? Pick one.
I think at this point I would have to go with Casey Affleck, because I just think he's a better actor than Ben Affleck was. I know that might be potentially outrageous thing to say, but I don't, not so much. But I think in terms of acting ability, I think Ben Affleck's a great director, and he's done other things that I've enjoyed. But I think Casey Affleck, I think the projects that he's done, I think he's definitely a lot more picky when it comes to what he does, and I think every performance he gives, it seems to, you definitely feel like you're getting 100% out of him.
Jack, if you take Ben Affleck out of the equation here, that means we have no Chasing Amy, we have no Armageddon, we have no Geely, we have no Batman versus Superman.
Yeah, Affleck was the bomb in Phantom.
Oh my God,
Kevin Smith reference.
Yes, yes. All right, let's briefly move on to a show we've been following. Actually, we of course, this is HBO's The Young Pope.
Yes.
We recorded our initial thoughts of the TV series a few weeks back. We're about more than halfway through the show's run now. I think it only has like 2 episodes left or something like that.
It's a 10-episode series, so 4 left. We're up to episode 6.
All right, there's 4 left. Okay. And I gotta say, A, it has grown on me. B, it's gotten better. My wife was down here the other night and it was on, and she's like, you're always talking about like how much you can't stand the show, yet you always have it on. I'm like, yeah, you're right. I do always have it on, because like the show perplexes me, Jack. I mean, every time we get a great scene, then a weird scene will come next, where I'm like, all right, like what's going on here? The pacing of the show still bothers me, and as gorgeous as the show looks, this is blasphemous, but the European tone of it just loses me. I'm sorry. I need a traditional form of storytelling. I'm lazy sometimes, Jack. I don't want to figure anything out. Talk to me. What are your thoughts?
Okay, yeah. My initial impression, I was right there with you. It does have a lot of European textures to it, and I think what happens, the initial episode, the pilot was, it threw me off. There was a lot of overt, kind of outlandish humor that just didn't work. But I think as the show has gone on, they've gone away from that, and it's gotten more serious. And the Jude Law character, he's not always a prick. I think he's a prick when he has to be, and when he's, especially when he's in public and when he's trying to exert his authority. But when he has those intimate moments with a couple other characters, Esther, the woman that they try to set him up with, and then his kind of like foster brother from the orphanage, and then there's a Monsignor that he kind of he has these intimate, kind of philosophical, theological conversations with them, and you kind of get the sense during those scenes that, wow, this character is very complex, and then the next scene he's a total prick. And you just want to hate him.
Yeah, like exactly. Like he'll have these great conversations where you can finally get to the heart of maybe who he is and how he ticks. And then in the next scene, he'll be yelling at the cook or the chef or whatever. So that kind of like, it throws me off every time I watch this show. But recently in that scene, we were talking about this the other day when he was going back and forth with the Italian prime minister. Scenes like that, okay, that's what makes this show really good, because he is so powerful in those scenes, Jude Law, that, I want to see more of that. Correct?
Yeah, he's very charismatic. I mean, I think we don't. I mean, I don't obviously. I don't think the purpose of it is that. I think what they're trying to do is kind of spotlight his arrogance and stuff like that. But it's a very, like, I think we mentioned that he's kind of like an anti-hero, and I think in the last podcast he did, we kind of explored the possibility that he might be doing it for some noble cause. I don't think we've seen any indication of that. But yeah, that scene with the prime minister was very good, and then also the scene with where he gives the speech to the Cardinals, which they were nagging him for like 4 episodes. When are you going to give this speech to the Cardinals? When are you going to give this speech to the Cardinals? Finally, he gives it, and it's this entirely a right-wing fundamentalist, doctrine that he wants to put forth, and everyone's kind of in shock. And he makes everyone kiss his shoe.
Yeah, man.
And then you see that he with the Cardinal Vogliello, the Secretary of State, he takes his other foot and pushes his head down.
Yeah.
I mean, even though obviously. I kind of enjoy seeing him being a prick, but at the same time, it's like it's very hyperbolic. Like, obviously, you wouldn't, this show doesn't pretend that it's taking place in the real world. It's taking place in this kind of hyper reality, and then with that it comes a lot of these kind of European flavor, kind of artistic things that they do that are just, sometimes it's very hard to relate to, but I think they do get a lot of things right, and it's hard to look away. I mean, it definitely has grown on me, and I definitely am looking forward to the last 4 episodes.
Yeah, me too. I mean, to that point that you were just talking about, I mean, the flip side of that, when he and his foster brother kind of sneak out of the Vatican, and they wind up in this, what seems to be this, 4 or 5 star hotel, and they're in regular, jogging clothes or whatever, and they just look like 2 American guys on vacation. But they happen upon this working girl, a prostitute, a beautiful prostitute, who they had this little, verbal sparring session with, and I think at one point didn't she ask if they were priests? Is that what it was?
Yeah, and they denied it. Yeah, I mean, and it's a very interesting scene, because in scenes like that you kind of feel like you're seeing them the way they really are without all the pretense.
Right.
And then the scene, and then the foster brother is another complicated character. There's an extended like threesome scene with him and a young man and a woman, and then this is before the Pope issues his decree that homosexual priests should not be admitted, and that they have to adhere to this strict clerical celibacy, and then also that they want to encourage this sort of not espionage, but they want to spy on applicants to make sure that they're adhering to this. So the foster brother ends up declining this young man's application, and the young man commits suicide. I mean, you get the sense that there is a real cost to a lot of these strict adherings to this religious doctrine that he wants to return the church to. There's a human cost to it, and I don't think he's you're not sure if he's quite aware of that.
Yeah, I will say that the past, I'd say 3 episodes have been really, really on the upswing for me, to the point where I've been kind of like looking forward to what the show offered, and I really hope they they continue on that trajectory. Now you sent me something about ratings. Even though that the show will have a second season abroad, it's a little unclear as to whether HBO has signed on for a second season.
Yeah, because HBO are essentially they're partners with these other foreign production companies, and it came out it was originally an Italian production, and the ratings were very high in Italy, at least for a premium cable network, or I guess the equivalent of what HBO is for them. Mm-hmm. But the ratings here haven't been that impressive. So we were just saying earlier how it might be possible that this show might get a second season, that HBO may not pick it up, that it'll just air in Italy and not air here, which would seem crazy, but I could see how that might happen, because a show like this, it has a very it's very esoteric, and it's very hard. It's hard to imagine that a great like a massive audience is going to really watch this show. But the ratings are not great. And so I think I don't know. It's kind of on the fence.
Yeah, Jack, I said it once. I'll say it to you again. I don't see anybody watching this show. You and I and a couple of my critic friends. That's it. I mean, I'm telling you now, right now, no one else I know watches this show. And that's not to say that it's bad. It's to say that for an American audience, I think this kind of programming is lost on them. And I'm not saying things have to be dumbed down for Americans, but the Vatican isn't exactly the kind of subject that I see Americans watching shows about. That said, you can say, oh yeah, well, what about Dan Brown and all that stuff? Well, yes, it's a detective novel with Tom Hanks.
It's kind of like Indiana Jones with Tom Hanks.
Yeah, I mean, there's a difference. I mean, this is a very, very slow-moving, esoteric, intelligent TV show about a pope. Okay? So, I don't know. I hope it comes back. I will be watching. And if it doesn't, I'm sure there are ways for us to watch anyway, Jack, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, I mean, I think the show does have, I think what it's trying to do is sort of look at institutional faith and kind of contrast it with kind of a personal faith. And, we see that a little bit with the character. So, yeah, I mean, I think it has a lot to offer, but it's a show you really have to think about.
Without a doubt. All right, so let's end it there. Before we do, I just want to let people know that we will be checking out the Super Bowl. We're going to be looking at least I'll be looking at all of the commercials. I
will too.
I've been doing it for years. When I was at my former job, I covered them every year, and it kind of became a thing with me. So now I feel like I still have to do it for the 4 people who are interested. And I guess we'll chat a little bit about the halftime show. And what Lady Gaga has to offer, right?
Yeah, it should be interesting. And in case you didn't see it, there was they did say that Stranger Things they are going to have a Super Bowl ad, and there's a photo. They haven't released a clip of a few of the cast members in these the Ghostbusters outfits. You see, Gavin Matarazzo. So I mean, that should be interesting. I think, and that's the one Super Bowl ad that I think, they haven't shown a teaser for, because a lot of the Super Bowl ads now they release the teasers, so you've seen them already, or maybe they haven't released a complete version of the ad that will air on the actual night of the Super Bowl. But with this one, they're really keeping this one under wraps. So it'll be interesting to see, what kind of footage we see for Stranger Things.
Yeah, it's going to be fun. So we'll be doing that. In the meantime, I just want to tell people that I got it, and maybe we'll be talking about this in a future show. But I saw La La Land this week. I was not looking forward to it.
I'm not looking forward to seeing it either.
I know.
Dude,
I know. I'm right there with you. But let me tell you, the movie will suck you in. 30 minutes in, you're going to be in. It is not an all song and dance film. It is not. So I wouldn't exactly call it a musical because there's very dramatic moments in the film. And I will predict this, Jack, that if you do watch the film, and I hope you do with your wife, either you or her or both of you, you will be crying. That's all I'm going to say.
Well, we do a lot of crying when we watch This Is Us, so it is possible that we might be bawling our eyes out by the end of the movie.
It's totally understandable that if you weren't crying at Manchester by the Sea, because that was a different kind of drama. This, Jack, I guarantee you will be crying. That's all I'm going to say. All right.
I'll see if I can Facebook Live.
Yes,
while we're
you do that.
Tears.
And no cheating with onions or anything like that. So, all right. So we'll be back, and I'll hit you up on Sunday night after the big game. Hopefully it won't end too late, and we can knock out a show and talk about the good, the bad, and the weird of Super Bowl commercials. Sound good?
there's a lot to look forward to. Yes.
Perfect. Talk to you then.
All right. Thanks, Anthony.
Bye-bye.
Enjoyed this episode of the Pop Culture Juke Joint? Then don't forget to tip the barkeep by subscribing and reviewing us on iTunes and Stitcher. Also, for some sizzling noir tales, head on over to Amazon to check out Anthony's hard-boiled fiction, available in print, digital, and audiobook formats. On social media, follow Anthony on Twitter at Anthony Venutolo or like his page on Facebook. For everything else, please visit his webpage at www.anthonyvenutolo.com. We'll see you next week.